Many creationists have claimed that animals are limited to kinds. Now, there are many flaws with this argument, but one of the simplest ways to refute it is to point to the transitional fossils between land mammals and whales. But, of course, creationists aren't going to take too kindly to that, and they're going to come up with bad arguments as usual.
Can you imagine what it would take for a wolf-like creature to turn into a whale? The little tail would have to turn into a gigantic fluke, and the forelimbs would have to turn into flippers.
They would need to evolve a brand new respiratory system. I mean, that's not easy. And then they would have to evolve a blowhole. And then their teeth would have to evolve into baleen. And that's not all.
Wow, there are way too many changes that would have to be made.
No, there's not. These things could all happen at the same time, over a process that takes millions of years. If you think that this is ridiculous, please explain why.
From the high school biology textbook, we see the first animal believed to begin evolving into whales. It says, Masonichids are one hypothesized link between modern whales and certain hoofed animals.
Oh, what is the imagined category of animals that includes sheep, camels, pigs, cows, deer, and wolves, thought to be the possible ancestors of whales?
I don't think that you understand how Jeopardy works, but let's get to the point.
That is correct!
Wait, the entire evolutionary ancestry of whales is based on an imaginary creature?
Yeah.
That's true.
No, the evolutionary ancestry of whales is not based on any one particular animal, but instead it's based on the fossils that we have and the conclusions that we can draw from them. It was once hypothesized that Masonichids were ancestors of whales because that was reasonable based on the information that we had at the time. I mean, we no longer think that that's the case because of more recent information, but it's important to note that Masonichids aren't imaginary creatures. They are actual animals that actually did exist and that we actually have fossils of. It was the ancestry to cetaceans that was hypothesized.
Your biology textbook also shows a diagram of a whale evolving. It depicts the next creature in the lineup, which was discovered in the 1980s. They only discovered partial fragments of the wolf-like skull, and since they didn't have the rest of the body, they imagined that it was an intermediate between a land animal and a whale. And textbooks included illustrations of it swimming in the ocean. But then more fossils were discovered, showing it to be nothing more than a land animal, yet it still appears in your textbook as an ancestor of the whale.
What is Pakicetus?
Correct!
It being a land animal does not discredit it as an ancestor to whales. And we didn't just assume on a whim that the Pakicetus skull was an ancestor to whales. The organization of its teeth, as well as the structure of its ear, indicated that it was indeed related to cetaceans. And when we found more of the Pakicetus, we only found more evidence that the Pakicetus lived partially in water, like the eyes being close together and close to the top of the skull, and the limb bones being hardened.
There are only 2 fossils ever found of this next creature on your chart. In your biology textbook, it says, the limb structure of this creature called walking whale suggests that these animals could both swim in shallow water and walk on land. However, it appears to be nothing more than a land animal. In other words, it was defined as a walking whale. Not because it had a whale's tail or flippers or a blowhole, but simply because they believed it to be. In fact, they didn't even find the part of the skull that would have a blowhole. But they still add a blowhole in museum drawings. And since it was a land animal with 4 legs, it was then called a walking whale.
What is Ambulocetus?
You are correct!
Wow, that's some serious circular reasoning.
Actually, there are more than 2 fossils of the Ambulocetus, which is actually more than we need. And I can't find anything anywhere stating that the Ambulocetus had a blowhole. I mean, even you can't find a picture where the Ambulocetus doesn't have a snout. But more recent studies have shown that the Ambulocetus was actually aquatic, mostly based on the thorax. And there are numerous signs to show that they are indeed transitional between land mammals and whales, including the ears, teeth, thorax, and nose. You're trying to make it out as if we're saying that they're transitional just because we want to, but the fact is, you're the ones who are ignoring the evidence.
This creature is often depicted in museum and textbooks with a tail fluke. However, they never found the fossil bones for their tail. Also, this creature was often portrayed with front flippers until they found fossils to show it actually had front legs.
What is Rodhocetus?
Correct!
Hallelujah.
You say that it's depicted with a tail fluke. Then why don't you show a depiction of it with a tail fluke? For those of you who don't know, this is what a tail fluke looks like, which most depictions that I could find did not have. But as for arms and legs, every picture I could find seemed to be on the same page. And yes, it did have arms and legs, but they clearly weren't used for walking on land, if that's what you're trying to get at. So, bottom line, the Rodhocetus was a whale that had characteristics of land mammals, indicating a transition. I don't see how what you're saying discredits that. Even if we didn't get all the details right at first, the evidence is still there.
Moving on. This creature seems to be nothing more than an extinct sea creature. What appears to be leftover legs from evolution actually turns out to be claspers used during mating season. This is true in many current species of whales.
What is Basilosaurus?
Yes!
Okay, this animal has a trait that's similar to whales. I guess it can't be a transitional fossil for whales then, but that doesn't make it not have traits similar to the animals that came before it. The point is to show a transition of traits.
Last one. This creature appears to be nothing more than an extinct whale. John!
What is Durodon?
Yeah, you're right, this is an extinct whale. But alongside the Basilosaurus, we've figured out that this isn't a direct ancestor to extant whales. There were some branches of the tree that died off. That still doesn't disprove the transition.
So, when you line up a theoretical ancestor, a couple of extinct land animals, an extinct sea creature, an extinct whale, and a couple of modern whales, you can tell a pretty good story about how a 100-pound wolf-like creature turned into a 360,000-pound blue whale. But it don't make it true.
Sure.
Yeah, you can have all of these fossils that show a clear transition of all of these traits, including the ears, teeth, nose, and limbs, but that doesn't mean that I have to accept all of your fancy facts.